everybody, we're looking at question number 1, and the directions are to find the volume of this rectangular prism. And the one formula that we use for rectangular prisms, we see right here written in blue, volume equals the length times the width times the height. Now, anytime you see mixed numbers and whole numbers in there, you want to turn them into improper fractions. That's especially true if we have what we call a non-terminating decimal. If we did 1 divided by 2, we'd get 0.5. But what if it was 1 divided by 3? That would be 0.3333. And that's when you definitely want to stick with using the fractions. All right, so this I already turned into an improper fraction. Let's turn this into an improper fraction. 2 times 1 is 2, plus the 1 more makes that 3 halves for the width. And that will be the same for the height. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 more makes that 3. All right, so the next step is to go ahead and look for reducing opportunities if there are any. And if there aren't, then you can just go right ahead and go right across and multiply your numbers together. So if we do 3 times 3 first, that would be 9. And 9 times 3 would be 27. So let's write that as our numerator. And then going across, if we do 1 times 2, that would be 2. And 2 times 2 would give us 4. All right. Now, usually they're not going to present the answer as an improper fraction. You would need to divide it out to get the mixed number equivalent. So we would do that off to the side. And then you ask yourself, how many times does 4 go into 27? It's not going to go in quite 7 times, a little bit shy of 7. So if we try the 6 and get the 24, subtract, we get the 3 left over, so it's going to be 6 3/4. 6 3/4 would be our final answer. And that's going to be cubic units. And when we write cubic units, we can either write the word units and then put an exponent of a 3, or we can actually write out the word cubic in front of this. The word cubic spelled C-U-B-I-C. So that reads as 6 3/4 cubic units. Now, just make sure you're clear on how volume is different than surface area. Surface area would be the gift wrap needed to wrap this up. And the units is how many square 1 cubic unit you can fit inside this rectangular prism. All right, so let's take a look at another example. Let's look at question number 2. Let me make a clear screen for that. All right, so we're going to use the formula volume equals length times width times height. Volume equals, let's call this the length, 5. Let's move that out of the way. We'll call this the width, 1. And we'll turn this into an improper fraction, something halves. And the something halves, this times this is 8, plus 1 more would be 9. And then we'll just stick a 1 underneath all of this to keep it neat and tidy. All right, so 5 times 1 would be 5, and 5 times 9 would be 45. And 1 times 1 would be 1, and 1 times 2 would be 2. So the volume is 45 halves, and that's cubic units. But once again, when you look at the answer choices, they're probably going to want this as a mixed number. So we have to divide that out. So you'll do that on your own. I think you can handle that. And that will be one of the answer choices that you'll see for number 2. Now, I do want to get into, so that's just straightforward volume. Many of the questions on this assignment, the 11.5, ask you to just find the volume. But what if they gave you something a little more complex? So let me find something just a little more complex. Let's look at this one here. It says in the figure, each small cube has edges that are 1/3 of a yard long. Which expression can be used to find the volume of the rectangular prism? So we're not going to look for choices because I'm not turning this into multiple choice. We're actually going to write an expression. So first of all, if we were just going to find the volume of this thing and we were assuming that this is 1 unit long, then we could count the cubes. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 cubes going that way for the length. So the length, I'm getting 4 cubes. But remember, we have to go back and say to ourselves that each cube has an edge length of 1/3. So we're going to learn a couple different strategies on how you can approach that. But I'm going to write that down. So we have 4. Going back this way, it's 3 cubes. And then going up, it's also 3 for a height. And again, that's 3 cubes. Now, what makes this a little more complicated is the fact that each cube is really 1/3, right? The edge length, that's the length of this line, is 1/3. Now, did you know if we just think of one cube, so let's just picture this cube right here. If we visualize that, and I'm going to try to draw a picture of it and just drag it separate. If we think about what is the volume of just this cube, if it's 1/3 going this way, and 1/3 going the other way, and 1/3 going the other way, and we were to figure out just the volume of one of these cubes, what's 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3? In other words, what's 1/3 cubed? What's 1/3 cubed? Because it would be 1 times 1 times 1, that's easy enough, that's 1. Now 3 times 3 would be 9. What's 9 times 3? It would be 27. So that means that we could find the volume of this thing as though these were full unit cubes, and then we can multiply it by 1/27th, which, by the way, is the same thing as 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3. So let me just kind of clean this up a little bit, and let's move that over here. So 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3 needs to be thrown in if they're looking for an expression. See how it says an expression that you could use to find the volume. This expression could be used. Now, if we wanted to substitute all of this instead of putting that and just put what this equals, this is equal to 1/27th. Now, if we were going to go ahead and actually find the volume of this thing, right? Let's proceed with that. We might stick a 1 underneath this to make it a little more user-friendly. We might look for some reducing opportunities. So let me move this out of the way so we can take advantage of the reducing opportunity here. Watch carefully because this can be a little confusing. We can simplify. How about this 3 and this 3? If we divide both of those by 3, we're going to be left with a 1. If we do the same thing with this 3 and this 3, right? 3 divided by 3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And if we kind of clean this up a little bit, that looks like all we have for reducing opportunities. So 4 times 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 would be 4. And 1 times 1 times 1 times 3 would be 3. So if we were interested in finding the actual volume of this thing in cubic units, not in third units, then we would just do 4 divided by 3, and that would give us our answer. It would go in one time with 1 left over. So when we talk about actual cubic units, or I'm sorry, cubic yards, because we're talking about yards now, it's actually 1 1/3 cubic yards would be the volume of this thing in cubic yards. But if they just want to know how many 1/3 unit cubes we have, then you would be multiplying 3 times 4 times 3. You would just be multiplying this stuff. And if we think about what that would be, 4 times 3 would be 12. 12 times 3 would be 36. And 36 would likely be an answer choice, but that would be how many cubes we have. We wanted to know if the cubes are each 1/3 yard long, what would it be in cubic yards? So we could just take this 36 and also multiply the 36 times the 1/27th, and that would also give us our answer, which is 1 1/3 yards. All right, now other questions that you'll see. It won't always be 1/3 of a yard, it might be some other number. So let's even look at this one. Let me erase what I had before, and let's just discuss it. All right, so if this wasn't here and they just wanted you to look at the picture and say how many cubes do we have there? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 going this way. We have 1, 2, 3 going that way, and 2 up, right? So if we just did 5 times 3 times 2, that would give us how many of these cubes that we have. But the issue, it says in the figure, each small cube has edges that are 1/3 yard long. So that means that if this is 1/3, and this is 1/3, and this is 1/3, you'd need 3 of them to make up one yard, right? So that green line represents 1 yard, and you can see that we have a little less than 2, right? So how do we deal with that when they want to know the actual volume in cubic yards? Because if I multiply 5 times 3 times 2, then I'm really talking about how many 1/3 yard cubes I have. So that means we have to throw into the mix 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3. And why are we doing 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3? Because that would be, if we wanted to get the actual volume of, say, just one of these cubes, like this corner cube here that I have highlighted in yellow, if we were interested in finding the volume of just that, it would be 1/27th. So to finish this up, I would have to do 5 times, let's do 5 times 2 to get 10, and then multiply into 3, and I apologize that my phone is ringing. So this would be 30, right? And 30 times 1/27th would give us the answer, but I have to answer the phone. Darn it.